The City of Apache Junction Health and Human Services Commission meeting to order. And we'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'm going to do roll call. Chairman Gersner.
Here.
Vice Chair Bory will be here presently. Commissioner Kinner.
Here.
Present. Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of agenda. Do I have a motion on the approval of the agenda?
I move that the agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Chairman Gersner.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kinner.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Approval of agenda 21-088.
So that was the consideration of the agenda. That one passed. Next, I need a motion on the approval of the minutes.
Do I have a motion on the approval of minutes?
I move that the regular meeting minutes of December 17, 2020 be approved.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, who's second?
Oh,
Oh, who made the motion?
Michelle.
Michelle, thank you. Commissioner Gersner.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bory.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kinner.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Public hearings.
So item number 3. Okay, thank you. We have no public hearings. We have no old business. We have no new business. So the next item on the agenda is presentation and discussion on the applications submitted for fiscal year 2021-22 funding. The attachments in your packet included a PowerPoint presentation that Ms. Bright put together. And we'll start with the presentation on the PowerPoint, and then we'll go into the applications, and then you can take over from there.
Thank you.
Okay. So the applications before you this evening, there are 5 of them. They all submitted by the deadline of January 31st. Excuse me. On the slide, you're going to notice that we received an application from the we call it AJCDC, Community Development Corporation, requesting $24,000. The Boys and Girls Club of the East Valley, even though they've combined with the Phoenix, they are still a separate entity here in the East Valley. Genesis Project is requesting $12,185. Let me back up to the Boys and Girls Club is requesting $35,000. Salvation Army, they are new this year. They are requesting $15,355, and the Superstition Food Bank, they're requesting $26,000. The next slide goes through what the CDC is requesting for, the $24,000, and they've broken down into the costs and where they've allocated the money. As you can see, they can pay for administrative costs They're looking at $6,200 for that. They have a list of community revitalization projects that they provide in their application. They also participate in the Household Hazardous Waste Transport Assistance, the annual Make a Difference Day, Playground Revitalization, Focal Point Brick Memorial, and Residential Address Identifiers. Boys and Girls Club, they talk about where they would put the money, and that's their salaries for employees and what we call EREs, which is the employee-related expenses. I know that seems kind of odd, but without the staff for the Boys and Girls Club, none of the programs get run. So whether they pay their employees to run the programs and be with the kids, or whether they purchase materials and then use somebody else's money for the salaries and EREs, it's a 50-50 wash across the board. So without staff there, then we wouldn't have the programming for the kids. Genesis Project. Their rent and utilities, if those are not paid and they're not able to make those payments, then they close up and they cannot serve the meals that they serve during the week. They also provide food and clothing, hygiene products, and whatnot. So they're asking for the $12,000 for that. Next is the Salvation Army. So they are new. They're doing a navigator outreach specialist. That would be for an employee. That also benefits and taxes. Those are the EREs. Swamp coolers, probably to keep some of the food cold. I'm only guessing here. Other salaries and costs and support services. So I imagine without volunteers or without paying staff, they wouldn't be there to give out what they do give out. And the food bank, usually when the donations go down at the food bank, they end up having to purchase food to help those in our community. And for us, that's pretty standard. I think back in 2020, I think they initiated an outreach program. I didn't see that listed here, but if you did want us to call or if you wanted to interview, that would be one of the questions, if they were able to do additional program. I know that in the code it says that this is not a reoccurring funding source for these entities, but sometimes their sole source is to provide food or to provide shelter or to provide assistance in some way. And that's why they're here. So they're not asking for an entire year's worth of budget money. So hopefully, if you had a chance to get through the applications, you'll talk about those here in a bit. Our next steps would be, we are getting to this at the end of the month, April. If you would like to hold a special meeting to interview any of the nonprofits, that's at your discretion. If you feel enough information was provided in their application, you don't have to interview any. If you want to interview some, not all, that's all up to the board or up to the commission. So if you do, we were looking at a couple of dates in April to hold that special meeting, because at the end of April, on your regularly scheduled meeting, I'd like to bring that spreadsheet back with each of your allocations that you wanted to divvy up, and what we'll do is we'll combine your allocations on one spreadsheet so you can kind of see where each other fell, and from that point, that gives you a good starting point of moving forward with either increasing or decreasing or reallocating funds accordingly. Your presentation to council, I believe, would be May 3rd or May 4th. That is at a work study session. You just kind of go over what the funding allocations were, what they proposed to do with the funds, and then what you as the commission decided to approve as far as funding allocations. We do that before the council adopts the budget. This way, if they do have any other questions, they've got one more meeting where they can ask staff or ask us to reach out to you for any further questions, at which time then we can present to them one more time. And then, of course, any of the agreements then become effective July 1. Have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Gersner, it's all yours.
Discussion and possible consideration of scheduling a special commission meeting in April to interview applicants. Interviews are not mandatory, but can be done if requested by the commission.
Would you like to talk about the applications at all, or?
I say we review the applications and then decide if we need a meeting. There might be something that we want to dive into.
If we would maybe even go back to the first application slide, if we had the slide to look at, then we could, each of us could look through our notes and maybe have a discussion on it.
Sure. I believe also in your packet, you were provided with the funding comparison table, who's applied in the past. The top number reflects what they applied for. The bottom number represents what the commission has provided as far as funding in the past.
Oh, I also have a question. I don't want to assume anything, but the question is, are we receiving the same amount as last year? Are we receiving $80,000?
Correct.
What is the
So,
amount?
correct. This commission has $80,000 for the discretionary funding. The Park and Recs took over the senior transportation program long before I got here, and I believe that's over $25,000. So I know that the whole appropriation funding is over $100,000.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I did the math that it's 108,540 that has been requested, and we have 80,000 to work with, so 28,540 is the gap, in case anybody wants to reference that.
And I have a question. Have all of the, our past applicants, have they all met the criteria for the month, or,
For the month, are you saying?
you know, for the quarter, I guess, I meant the quarter.
So the ones that are under current contract,
Correct.
have they met the requirements for their funding this year? Yes, they have.
Okay.
And then in the packets, you'll also find, Jill did a checkoff list for the ordinance that talks about ordinance 659, which listed the criteria that needed to be submitted in the application. So something that we've been talking about for a couple of years is the issue of making sure that they were a resident of Apache Junction versus the community of Apache Junction. So if I'm an individual without a residence, I can get a voter registration card and list the southeast corner of Apache Trail and Superstition Boulevard so that I have the right to vote. If I'm homeless, I may or may not have a car, and I'm in the community. So the discussion of whether it was a physical resident person with a home address paying utility bills, that was one of the criteria that was used to prove that they were a resident of the community. So recently it was opened up to that if you're serving those in our community, because we do have a few county islands, and they may be low income and they may need assistance in certain areas. They're part of our community. They shop here, they live here, they pay their taxes here. So that was a discretionary area that we were able to not require proof of residency. The other dealt with the audit report. A CPA audit report is thousands of dollars. Talking to the finance officer now, I said, depending on which financial auditing you're going to use, there could be a variety of requirements or the cost could be extravagant. So we can use QuickBooks, we can use, general ledger reporting, as long as they provide some detailed auditing and that they didn't do it in-house. They can have a bookkeeper or somebody that's a third party provide us with the financials of the company. So you'll see the checkoff list that Jill did. I think most everybody has number 1 and number 5, that because these are applications, these are not the quarterly reports. So they have met the requirements under 659. And then Heather Patel created the electronic form, which makes it nice because they can submit up to midnight via email. And they were all submitted online by the 31st. They were all submitted by the 31st. And within the application, you'll see possibly more detail as to what they're looking to do with the funds.
Can I ask a question on the addresses? P.O. boxes, are those included in that designation?
I would have to double check on that. I didn't think they were, but I'd have to double check.
Because sometimes, I mean, if they don't have a physical address,
But they'll have a
they'll have a P.O. box,
Right,
to receive their mail or their social security checks or,
right,
whatever mail they're receiving.
yeah.
I know
I would
before
have
we
to check,
couldn't
'cause I
use
have
it. Yeah.
I'm a resident in a different city, and I have a P.O. box in a different city.
Uh-huh.
So I would have to check
Okay.
about the P.O. box.
So at this point, can we discuss some of the questions that we might have? And maybe someone else on our commission would have an answer. What I'm seeing on the application, I may or may not be what, others are seeing. And this is just in what they had presented, what the organization had presented. And it looks like they're looking for funding on their project proposal. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas. Yeah, well, you've got it right up here.
Commissioner Erickson, which, are we talking about the CDC?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, and I think it would make sense for us to go through it sequentially.
Okay.
And each of the items, whatever, whatever the funding is for, would be funding that would be serving health and human service needs. So when I look at all of the items on that list, I would really want to focus on just the ones that would serve health and human service needs. As, from what I'm seeing, not everything would.
I reviewed some of the past council meetings, and back in 2018, the council was very adamant that the money come back into the community to serve the residents. I know that last year, some administrative costs were computer software, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, does that serve the community? Or, so like I said, it can be a broad spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
or you can narrow it down and say, we'll fund these, but we're not going to fund administrative costs. That's all up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can say, what are you covering under administrative costs?
Sure.
Is this insurance for the building, or is this insurance, what is covered under admin costs?
And I don't have a problem with administrative costs. You need the administrative funding to have the people to do the services. I guess I would just ask them, what is the Focal Point Memorial?
Oh, the
And-
brick memorial?
And how does that serve, that
Right.
would be a question for them if
For
they
them?
came.
Sure.
I don't know if someone knows the answer
Well,
to
during
that.
the city council meeting, they put up something up there about how to reserve the bricks and what it's for. So I was surprised that this was even a request, because it seemed like something that's a bit odd for a nonprofit to want to do, if that makes sense. I mean, we could all go and get bricks at the Focal Point. I mean, it's all easy to do online with the request process. You can type in the lines of information. So I just thought that was a really odd request to begin with.
This could be tied to the, they're also partnering with the AJ Philanthropists, and they were buying a special ink to redo some of the redo some of the ink that had faded out of the brick. So they were repainting some of the bricks. So again, good question for them.
Yes. Yeah, and in just seeing some of the presentations they've made in the past, and actually the presentations that have been done at city council meetings, it's amazing, the work with some of the homes and the properties and helping to improve our community. It's phenomenal. So I think this definitely does fit the Health and Human Services Commission's requirements for an agency to provide the funds, and it does provide a real service for our community.
So usually I wouldn't have a problem with administrative costs, but their budget isn't that high. When I look at the actual budget documents, if I'm seeing this correctly, they don't have a heck of a lot of money in-house already. So there's not a lot of fundraising being done by the organization on their own with their skin in the game, so to speak. So I actually am more opposed to the administrative costs here than I would be with organizations that have existing programs that are ongoing, like the Boys and Girls Club, and so on and so forth. So I looked at that as something that's an easy cut. But then again, if you look at last year, they requested the same 24,000 and they received 6. So in terms of, looking for places to save, that was one that I found that could be a very easy cut. Looking at this list, Make a Difference Day is awesome. I think it's a special thing that they even talk about during the council meetings. It's a really good thing that AJ does. I think that all systems go on that. I was very excited to see that on the list. I also know from my experience working with fire departments that residential address identifiers are a community safety thing. So you kind of want to have clearly marked things around the community. So that looked like it was directly going towards our community as well. And it's a safety thing, So I liked those two things the most on the list. And of course, if we're going to do more, then the playground revitalization was the third. But looking at that list, I think there's some things that we could possibly think about, if we have to find a way to get down to 80,000. That's my opinion. Also, just one other thing that was concerning was on page 11, they mentioned they partner with organizations. As a member of the Rotary Club, I've been there for a year. I have not heard the Rotary Club at any meetings, any conversations about a partnership with CDC. So I go to every Rotary Club meeting with my mom. I'm at every one, and I've not heard anybody come from CDC to say that they partnered with us on any project. But I'm not necessarily the president of the Rotary, so I'm not in charge of everything that we might be doing. But again, that was a concern to me when I saw that they listed us on there as well.
Perhaps, again, having them come and just explain a little bit more about what the administrative costs are, and do they have any other source of income? Again, looking at an agency that wants to do all of this work, if they don't have the administrative support, they probably would have a really hard time doing the rest of the things that they have on their list. So that'd be a question I think we need to ask them.
And page 15, they do kind of itemize a little bit. Administrative is insurance, website and email, postage, printing, office supplies, miscellaneous. So they do list out kind of what they're looking for each of those items.
And I know that the hazardous waste, that's an important one for the community. I've used it several times myself, and, it's great to have a place to, take all of this stuff too.
I agree. This area has a little bit of a problem of dumping in the desert, so if we can discourage that.
Do you want me to move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
And I'm sorry, remind me again what we're doing with these.
That's yours.
Okay, just for my own personal.
That's your scoring rubrics for each
Gotcha.
of the, there's one for every application.
Okay.
And as you go through the application at home, you just fill out the rubrics.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any discussion on the Boys and Girls Club?
A few of my thoughts after reviewing it. I hope I'm not dominating the meeting or anything because I looked at everyone. I'm just going to give my opinion. I like that they've always been a part of this particular program, and we've always given them something. Again, just looking at their budget, they by far and away have the biggest budget of any of the organizations that we're looking at, and probably the biggest brand recognition. But I think it's very important, the work that they're doing, especially hearing about the difficulties that our youth have been going through over the last year, getting adjusted to COVID, the new world situation here. But I think, again, if looking for ways to cut, if you look at what we did in fiscal year 2019-2020, we gave them $24,500 on a request of $35,000. So again, they're making a request for $35,000. My first thought was, maybe there's a way to just say, hey, we're going to do what we can, but we have to balance everybody's request, you know?
Yes, and last year, the request was 35, and we actually gave them $16,700 last year. And I also looked at their, it's not on a page, but, yeah, it looks like they were able to get the funding from other sources. They had a special event this last year where they netted $50,000 from a special event. So that can offset quite a bit. And as a larger organization, they have, again, the brand recognition. They have the ability to get out there and seek funding, and people, children, teens need that support. And our community is a very giving community. So I think, a large organization like this versus one of the smaller organizations within our community, being able to have that large organization find alternate sources of funding, it's much easier. So, that I would take into consideration as well with, the whole, in being able to provide the funding for each one to cover all of the agencies requesting funding.
Well, and with Boys and Girls Club too, I mean, this helps parents who are trying to get back into the workforce, have a safe place to have their kids go. And especially now that school has started back up again, it's going to be, tougher on them to be sure that their kids can get somewhere safe while they're working now. And their programs are, a variety of programs in all sorts of different areas that are really needed by kids and youth development. A thought that just came to my mind as well is I'm wondering how many of this, there's been some COVID funding available to agencies, and I wonder if any of our agencies have been able to get COVID funding that would support their salaries and their activities that they do. Does the city get any of that information?
We did not request any of that information from them.
Okay, that would be another question we could ask them when they come in.
You can.
But one thing I would say is that they did approach the city council for a liquor license for an event, and they never ended up having the event because it was canceled. So
Yeah.
I do happen to know that happened this last year.
Mhm.
So I think, that's for our local events and local, even though they do have the biggest budgets and brand recognition, they also were hurting a little bit for what they needed in the last year.
And I saw that in some of the other applications too.
Right.
They had, events planned, which never happened because of COVID. So, it is a real consideration.
Well, and all of their funding events and others to other nonprofits, were large crowds. I mean, it needed the large crowd to help raise the, awareness and the funding for these different organizations. So I think everybody's struggling on this one.
Ready for the next?
So Genesis last year was their first time applying for funding. They had requested the 10.5 or 12,000, and the commission granted them 10.5. Of the $80,000 that was for that year, their request, you funded 87% of their funding request. The Superstition Community Food Bank, you funded out of the dollar amount that they requested. I broke it down into percentages as well. So that's another area that you may want to go, is if you're undecided, you may think, okay, maybe I want to do 35% of their funding request, or, 35% of the 80,000. So there's another way. I know we always try to do the metrics on it. Sometimes it comes down to simple, you know what, I'm going to do 20%, 15, 24, and you can defeat it that way. So there is no specific way here on how you come to your determination. It's just that when we do send you that spreadsheet, we'll ask for it back, and then we'll consolidate all of your answers, and that way you can take a quick look and see how each of you funded each organization. But there's you can look at it different ways. You can percentage of what they're asking or percentage of the 80,000.
Can you provide that breakdown that you did for the previous years so we can see that?
I only did this last year.
Okay, that's fine. That's all we need.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Send it to you.
So I think Genesis had a pretty clear ask. It's not too complicated what they want to do. Looks like they did a similar ask last year. Obviously, I wasn't privy to the information at that time, but it looks like they received roughly what would be the cost of their rent. And so I look at it the same way. Maybe if we're looking for a few places to slash, maybe we just don't cover the utilities on it, but we do cover the rent. Because I think what they're doing is very, very meaningful work and very helpful work and very visible work. I think everybody that sees everybody out there on the streets knows that Genesis is feeding people, and at a time when it's really needed. So I highly recommend them as well. They're not making an outlandish ask here.
Mm-hmm. And they not only use that space for feeding, but they also have services that are available from the community that come in. And they have a food, not just food, but the clothing. And a lot of people living on the street, this is a place where they receive their clothing as well. Hygiene products, heat relief. So there's a, and all of that takes space. So for them to be able to, have the space, they need to pay the rent.
Well, in showers and washing of clothes and those type of things, I think they're given, I don't know if it's vouchers or something, but would that be listed under the utilities or under the rent, or?
It does say it includes water with their rent
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I do know the showers program is one of the things that they do for our residents. And they make a really good use of their space. I actually have been over there to see how they do with the feeding, and it's like everything is, if it's not cases of water, it's cooking supplies and everything ready to go. And so they use every ounce of that space. So, I mean, I don't think they could cut or repurpose their space at all. And I think that because they're such a uniquely Apache Junction charity and uniquely, one of our nonprofits, I really advocate for what they're doing.
I'm going to go back to a question that was asked with the first one, is how much fundraising do they do on their own? I see there's a tea party here, but the majority of what else comes through, they're dependent on the United Food Bank discounts and so on. But being new to the community, I've heard of them, right? But I guess you say that have a good presence. So I'm just kind of wondering how much are they kind of looking out for on their own as well?
Well, I know Trinity spoke at our Rotary Club, and they received a check for $500 that day, but that was just, they didn't even list it as a community partner. But they did have a budget of, roughly over $220,000 from what I could see. So, I mean, they are doing something. It's not like this is their only source of support.
No,
but I think it is a very useful thing to help take care of that building cost for them to keep the operation going, you know.
And they did include a description of some of the partnerships that they're doing. And just one of them, again, it takes the space. They donate classroom space and hands-on cooking in their fully commercial kitchen for an 8-week culinary class that's provided free of charge to those who are unable to afford traditional culinary school. So it's another way that they're really utilizing the space for people to obtain the skills in order to get a job that will support them, to get people out on their own.
Well, and two, I imagine they were hit pretty hard with COVID also, with their volunteers, the type of volunteers that could actually go in and help, you know, so it's, which also brings sometimes that amount of money coming in too, because a lot of volunteers tend to give cash too, along with volunteering hours too.
Are you ready for the next?
And this one, it took me a little while to figure out why they were only requesting funding for the Navigator Outreach Specialist for part of the year and not the whole year. And it's, the explanation came a little later on in the application where it apparently is for the hotter months when they have more of a need for services. That person is out there and helping a little bit more, so
It's not a full-time job, not a
right,
full-time
it's
position.
not a full-time job, so hence that's why it's not, you know, seemed like a very small amount.
Well, Salvation Army, I think, is really one of the pillars of a community, and I know from my experiences with them in Chicago, just if there's a disaster, they're the first place that you're going to turn to. And I know we haven't had any crazy issues with the power grids going out or anything, but if something like that happened in the summertime, you know, I just think what would happen to our residents, and there'd be an emergency response. And I know the Salvation Army would be right there. The other thing that's interesting is how localized it is. I mean, what Darla's doing is different than, you know, she doesn't have like the access to the nationwide budget as much. She's working with her own local resources. So I was happy to see that they made the request, and largely they have a very specific list of what they want to do. So clearly we haven't had any prior experience of what we've given versus what's been requested, but I think it's a very worthwhile organization to support. So
I agree.
One thing in their application is they do talk about utilizing other agencies in the area. And so it might be a question for you as, you know, who are you partnering with in the area, and how are the other organizations partnering with the other organizations? I believe that was Chairman Erickson's questions in previous years, is who are you partnering with in the community so that you can utilize most of the resources? Might be a very good question to ask your applicants.
There's much more power when the community works as a team together. And I see over the years that this partnership is actually increasing. And it's really important for us to promote that, as well as to find out, you know, who else is you know, is it that you're working with? So, good comments, thank you.
I know with the feeding, they were doing some feeding right there on Broadway at the facility, and they ended up scrapping some of that because the work's already being done by Genesis. So there was kind of a duplication of services there. So that's something that I know has already been taken into consideration to a degree. I don't know the whole extent of it, but short of an interview of everybody, we wouldn't know that, but still.
Well, and I know also that Seroptimus, you know, helped with the bell ringing. You know, this is a couple of years ago now, but because I don't know what happened really last year, if there was that much out there, but, so it's taking different organizations and helping to utilize some of those volunteers out there in our community. So I think it's a great, it does a great job.
All right, last one, Superstition Food Bank. Any questions or comments on the food bank? There are pretty standard
Yeah.
nonprofit.
And they provided some really good data as far as the percentage of people who are below poverty that are seeking services there, or the food, and the number of individuals served. And, just, like last year, they assisted 125 veterans, 25 breastfeeding mothers, 33 new mothers, 609 individuals indicated they're disabled, 96 clients indicated they have mental illness, but overall, they assisted an estimated 26,000 individuals in AJ. That's a lot of service. So, they really do an amazing job. And the need with COVID, people have not been able to work, or, their kids are home from school, and therefore they have to be home to watch the kids. And food security is a huge issue. So, the amount of food that they need has increased and is continuing to increase. So, I'm not surprised they're asking for that amount for the food.
And what I like about them specifically is the intake process. These are our residents. It's not people that are coming in, from Queen Creek to hit the food pantry. They make sure that people bring mail, and they verify, and then they call and follow up with them, which I think is awesome. So this is really our community's food bank, and I think it's a huge need. So I looked at that and I thought, hey, 100%. That request is 26,000. Give them the money for what they need, because this is going directly to help the community.
It's interesting you bring that up, because on page 4, there was a number that jumped out to me. It said, as our commitment to the city of Apache Junction, 65% of our recipients are residents. So I'm not sure how to balance that with you just said.
Well, I guess
Some of
it
those
it
are
comes
county
from,
residents.
I guess it just comes from having referred people to the food bank and the process that they follow when they go through that. I know that they do a pretty thorough intake. It's not just, you can't just walk up and get served. If you're a new customer for them, you're going to be brought to a specific line. You got to show them the identifications, and they do call and follow up with everybody. So that I thought was good. I know it's not, I don't know what that would be a good question to ask when they say 65% versus.
Yeah, above it says that they aid in Gold Canyon, Queen Creek, Northwest Pinal County, and East Mesa. So I'm going to assume the other 35%.
Might just be
is
those
coming from
areas.
that?
Yeah, but I know that it's not like you're going to come up from Queen Creek or drive from Gilbert over here, to hit the food bank or something. They're not going to serve you. It's only those that are really directly impacted by us.
Because I noticed last year they got about 72% of what they asked for, so that would pretty closely fall in line with these numbers, I think.
Yeah, I like that it's not administrative or overhead, it's directly to the program. In Chicago, I used to have an office at a food pantry, and I know that the number one thing you can give to a food pantry is money. If you give them, canned goods, that's fine, but they can go and buy these things with much cheaper rates than you or I could. So I know that dollar for dollar, it's a huge thing for a food pantry to receive money as opposed to even those canned donations. I know people like to do those, but they're helpful, but they're not exactly as helpful as what they have in terms of their own partnerships. So I think dollar for dollar, that's a great thing. It's going directly to the bottom line of our citizens. It's going right into their mouths. So that's why I think this is a huge, huge deal.
And this is one of the ones that that listed the types of fundraising that they normally have and said that they were all canceled. So they have not been able to do the fundraising that they normally do.
It sounds like we need a meeting.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, I agree.
All right.
A lot of questions in there.
So the next item on the agenda is number 4, which was discussion and possible consideration of scheduling a special commission meeting in April to interview the applicants. And this is whatever you decide. You want to interview them all? Do you have questions? I would suggest writing up your questions and getting them to Jill and I as soon as possible. I think to utilize the time most efficiently would be for them to be prepared for your questions. If there's specific information that you're wanting from an organization, they should know what it is so they can be prepared to answer that question rather than say, I'll have to get back to you.
Nice.
Yes.
How soon do you want those questions?
Depending on the
Week or?
depending on the date that you find,
What date did you,
schedule.
yeah, you had some date options
We
for us
did.
there, right?
So April 15th. Let me pull up my calendar real quick.
Can you pull up the calendar on the screen?
Oh, yeah, let me do that.
Bottom right-hand
Oh,
corner.
wrong one.
Just the bottom right-hand corner where the date is.
There you go.
Is this something that happens
no, they-
Not that one.
every year?
Just a calendar.
Oh.
with
The interview
Oh,
with the
April
nonprofits?
calendar.
Yeah,
Okay.
An
yeah,
April
we
calendar.
have-
Been interviewing.
Thank you.
We have been.
Every year.
That help?
yes.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so April 15th, a Thursday.
So April 15th is a Thursday,
And it's tax day.
and as far as we know right now, council chambers is available. April 21st, which is the third Wednesday, we currently show this room available.
Personally, I prefer earlier because we need to have recommendations on the 26th, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. We would like to give them a little bit of notice. So if you do decide on the 15th, if you could get us your questions early, that way when we do call them to let them know we'd like to have them come in for a discussion in front of the commission, we can send them a list of your questions.
So maybe questions by April 1st, meeting on the 15th?
I wouldn't be able to attend or call in on the 15th.
Okay. What date can you?
I can do the 21st, the Wednesday, I just can't do Thursdays. I can't do any Thursdays at this particular moment.
Okay. Will that give us all sufficient time then to make our recommendations on the 26th?
Just one quick question before we go into planning the meeting. Do you think we have enough here to make the recommendations? Because I already looked at it and wrote down what I believe would be a good recommendation. I don't think I would need to ask further questions. There are some things that are not quite clear, but is it worth scheduling another meeting over?
For me, no.
Because I would say it's not for
So
me either.
that There might, I don't,
I'm just saying, I don't think it's worth it for me to schedule another meeting. I feel like I got enough here to work with. There are a few inconsistencies and a few things I don't know, but not enough where I'm going to say it's worth another meeting for. That's my own opinion, but if anybody shares that, I don't know.
Well,
And-
Salvation Army, this is their first time applying.
In their application should follow the scoring for your rubrics. So you're looking at that rubrics and you're measuring, did they answer this question on a scale of 1 to 5? How well did they answer the question? So that is to help you determine your funding, because prior there was no metrics for measuring how the commission funded nonprofits, which bothered me significantly. You should have a groundwork as to how did you decide to fund $50,000 to one entity and none to the rest. So this application is to help you walk through that scoring metrics to determine how much did you want to fund them. So if you're not finding the information within the application itself, that's a problem that we would probably need to address. But if you feel the questions have been answered significantly to the best of their ability, you may not want another meeting. That's up to you.
Would there be a possibility, if we do find that we have questions, to submit them and just have a written response from them by the time we meet?
That's what I was going to ask too.
Yes, yes.
Because
Yeah.
that would make it much easier, and I
Yes.
think,
And
you know,
having to-
a written response would be quite acceptable to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You would ask staff to ask the question, because I don't want to violate open meeting law with having them communicate with all of you back and forth. But we would, if you send us your questions, we will send them out to the organization that you had questions with, and we will gather those questions and present those at that meeting.
That would work for me.
When is the spreadsheet due with our recommendations? Because I'd much rather see everybody else's opinions on the spreadsheets before we go into that next meeting, so we can figure out where everybody's headspace is, you know?
Sure. So
How do
we'll
we get it down to 80,000, you know?
We'll send you the spreadsheet tomorrow morning, and then if you want to get us that spreadsheet back by the 31st, because you still have until the end of April is your next regular meeting. I mean, that still gives you lots of time.
And our regular meeting will be on the 26th.
26th, Monday the 26th. So even if you want to have it back to us by the 7th, we can compile it and get it back to you by the 8th of April. That still gives you like 3 weeks to look at what everybody decided, for you to go back through the application. If you didn't like somebody's scoring or didn't like you can say, well, I kind of, was leaning on this amount because this was answered or this was not answered. And that is up to you. Just to let us know.
So the questions by the 31st, if we have questions for the agencies, the spreadsheet by, what was it?
If you want to give it to us the 12th, because if you give us questions and we send it out to the applicants on the 31st or the 1st, that gives them, if we send it to them on the 1st, that gives them a week to respond. Or we can give them until Monday the 12th and forward those responses to you on the 13th. Because then you want to send the scoring after you see their answers. So if we have if they have to submit them to us by Monday the 12th, we can compile all of those answers and get them to you on the 13th.
And will you send us out a schedule of what we end up finally agreeing on here?
Say that again.
Will you send us out a schedule of what,
Sure.
what we're all agreeing to here?
Sure.
So that we make sure we've got our dates.
So your
in there.
questions to Jill and I, we would need those by the 31st.
Okay.
Staff would turn around and send those questions to those entities on Thursday. We would give them until Sunday at midnight, if that works, or, first thing Monday by noon. Monday by noon.
Which date is that?
That is April 12th.
Okay.
We can turn around and send you all of the answers on Tuesday the 13th. Oh, my calendar just expanded. There we go. And then if we get you, or if we have all of your divvy of money by the 19th, that would give you a week to look at how everybody scored or divvied up the funds for you to discuss on the 26th. Does that work for everybody? So your questions to us by the 31st of March. April 1st, we'll send those questions out to the applicants. We'll ask that they be back by the 12th at noon. We will send you the list of answers on the 13th. Please don't correspond with each other. You would have to us on the 19th your appropriation of funds for the entities. And on the 20th, you would receive a spreadsheet from us that lists how each of you divided them up.
And that's on what day again?
So are we talking, when is your next
Score-
meeting?
Scoring after April the 19th, and then
On the 20th, you'll see how everybody
Scored.
appropriated the funds,
okay.
and I'll send you a list of all those dates. And then you should be ready by the 26th. And on the 26th, we'll have the spreadsheet up, which has formulas in it, and we can work right then and there. And it'll get you down to the 80,000. Does that sound good? Okay.
Do we have a motion for that item?
I don't think it's a motion because this was whether to schedule another meeting or not, Jill. I don't have the agenda.
Yes, I did do motions for yes.
So the motion would be not to schedule another meeting. So I would motion that we do not schedule a follow-up meeting to interview the nonprofits.
Second.
Okay. And roll call. So Chairman Gerstner,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bory,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinner.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. There will be no additional special meeting in April. We'll send you the information, and we'll be looking for yours back. I'll send that calendar out to you. And I think that concludes our business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Do we have any information reports? I have some
Any other
information.
questions?
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Okay. One of the agencies that received funding for this year received funding for mental health first aid training, and they still have several trainings available for the community. And I would just like to make an announcement about that training. They had 10 trainings for people who live and work in Apache Junction, and there are 3 trainings left that still have openings for members of our community to attend. One on April 8th, on May 3rd, and on June 4th. And the mental health first aid training is taught by certified trainers, and my husband and I have gone through it. It is very helpful for people within the community that may or may not be mental health practitioners, but it's something that I would recommend. They contact the Sherry Debris at, let's see, I don't know if I should give the
Horizon Health and Wellness.
Horizon Health and Wellness. The phone number there is 480-474-5518. So, and I have copies if any of the commissioners would like to attend. I know they're looking for people that would be willing to attend.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the staff liaison report?
Say again?
The staff liaison report?
Do not have anything to report.
All right.
I
The-
had one other thing I was going to say while we're talking about information about community items. On the 27th, the Rotary Club Superstition Mountains is doing a social activity. So from noon until about 4 p.m. on the 27th, There is a place called the Sunland Theater. I think it's Sossaman in Maine, the corner of Sossaman in Maine. It's a social with music and food, $10 to attend the event. And so it's open up to all the Rotarians and people in the community that are interested. So I would recommend coming.
That's March.
Yeah,
Is
this
that
is
correct?
this Saturday coming up on the 27th
And what time?
from noon until I think 4 p.m.
The regularly scheduled commission meetings are the fourth Monday of each month at 5 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard. I adjourn this meeting.
Okay, 6:07.
Good. Thank you.